She hadn't spoken in 4 months. Doctors had no answers, and her mom was worried sick, until a tiny rescued puppy showed up. Then he did something no one could ever imagine, and changed her life forever. One silent little girl, one little puppy, one amazing miracle. Before we start, make sure you're subscribed, and don't forget to tell us in the comments where you're watching from. We love hearing from you. The night the whispering wind swept across Laurel Ridge, Dana Calder stood alone in the warm glow of her kitchen, hands resting on the counter, staring at a cup of tea she had already reheated twice. Across the hall, through the cracked open door of her daughter's nursery, she could see a faint shimmer of movement, her little girl shifting restlessly in her crib. Ellie was barely 2 years old, tiny, bright-eyed, and utterly silent. Not just shy silent, not just stubborn silent, completely, hopelessly, painfully silent. For 4 months she hadn't spoken a single word. Therapists, neurologists, specialists, everyone had an opinion, but no one had an answer. Some called it trauma. Some said selective mutism. Others hinted at something darker, something locked deep in her tiny chest that she could not release. But Dana knew one thing with a mother's certainty. Ellie wanted to speak. She just couldn't. Every night she woke up crying without making a sound. Her mouth would open, her tiny throat strained, but nothing came out. And the worst part? She never cried anywhere else in the house. Only in her nursery, only in the same spot, the small corner beside her crib. Every time Dana passed it, she froze, eyes wide, breath trembling. But Ellie never gestured, never tried to explain. And because she couldn't speak, no one could understand. Tonight was no different. At 1:43 a.m., the familiar pattern began. Soft rustling, the shift of small feet in her crib, then the silent sobbing that broke Dana more than any scream ever could. She rushed to the nursery, bracing herself as she always did, ready to hold her daughter through her invisible storm. But when she reached the door, something unexpected caught her eye. A small figure sat beside the crib. A dog. No, a puppy. The tiny, curly-coated mutt they had brought home only 5 days ago from a roadside rescue table outside the grocery store. His name was Waffle, chosen by the volunteer who had found him abandoned in a cardboard box. He was maybe 10 weeks old, soft brown fur, mismatched ears, and big brown eyes that always looked like they knew too much. Waffle never barked, not once. He barely played. He followed Ellie everywhere, quietly, loyally, as if he understood her silence. Tonight, though, he wasn't just following her. He was protecting her. Waffle had placed himself between Ellie and the corner of the crib, not aggressively, not fearfully, but intentionally, purposefully, as though he sensed something no one else could. Ellie sat in her crib, knees drawn up, tiny fists gripping the bars, face blotchy with tears she could never express. Her little shoulders trembled as she rocked slightly forward and back. Waffle inched closer, placed a paw gently on the crib rail, and lifted his chin to touch his nose to her arm. Ellie froze. Dana froze. Waffle nudged again, slow and soft. Ellie's breathing slowed. Her tiny hand lifted and touched Waffle's soft fur. The first willing touch she had given anyone in weeks. Then something extraordinary happened. Waffle turned toward the corner of the crib, sniffing and pressing his little body gently against it, letting out a low, trembling whine. Dana frowned. Not a scared whine, not a hurt whine, a grieving whine. Deep, old, heavy. Like loss itself had found a voice. Ellie's face crumpled as she watched Waffle cry. Her mouth opened, and though no sound came, tears spilled down her cheeks in a silent flood. Waffle nudged her hand again until her fingers curled into his fur. Her sobs slowed. Her tiny body relaxed. Ellie leaned forward, resting her forehead on Waffle's neck, and closed her eyes. She fell asleep like that, for the first time in 4 months. Peacefully, Dana pressed a shaking hand to her mouth. "What on earth did you just do, little guy?" she whispered. But Waffle didn't look at her. His gaze stayed fixed on the corner of the crib, unmoving, alert, as if guarding something unseen. Over the next several days, Ellie's behavior changed in small, miraculous ways. She still didn't speak, still didn't make a sound, but she laughed, a silent laugh that shook her tiny shoulders and lit her bright eyes every time Waffle tripped over his own paws or chased dust in a sunbeam. She followed him around, clapping tiny hands at his antics. He curled up at her feet during meals and slept pressed against her side every night. Yet every morning, without fail, Waffle would sit in front of the crib corner, Not barking, not scratching, just sitting, guarding. Dana didn't want to be superstitious, didn't want to believe in energies or emotional echoes, but something was undeniably wrong with that corner. One afternoon, while Ellie napped with Waffle sprawled across her chest, Dana gathered enough courage to inspect the crib corner. She expected nothing, just an ordinary corner. But the moment she peered closer, a faint old smell drifted out. Not foul, not dangerous, but old. Old and dusty and strangely sad. Inside was a tiny wooden rocking chair, the kind built for a child. Its paint was chipped, its cushion faded, its seat slightly indented like someone had sat there often. On the backrest, faintly carved into the wood, was a name. Milo. Dana frowned. Who was Milo? This house had been cheap, shockingly cheap. The realtor had mentioned something vague about previous family circumstances, but nothing more. A sudden soft sound behind her made Dana jump. Waffle stood at the doorway, hackles slightly raised, not in aggression but in deep instinctive awareness. Ellie crawled over beside him, eyes locked on the little rocking chair. Her lip trembled. Without a sound, she backed away. Waffle moved with her, placing himself between Ellie and the crib corner as if shielding her from something only he understood. That night, Dana called the former homeowner. Mrs. Ansell, a middle-aged woman with tired eyes and a voice that carried 1,000 unsaid things. When Dana mentioned the name carved into the chair, Mrs. Ansell inhaled sharply. "Oh," she whispered, "you found it." "Found what?" Dana asked. There was a long silence. "Milo," Mrs. Ansell finally said. "He was my son. He died here, 4 years ago in that room." Dana's heart lurched. "I didn't want to leave the rocking chair behind. I really didn't. But when we moved, I couldn't bring myself to take it. It belonged to him. He used to sit there every day, humming to himself. That corner was his safe place." I'm so sorry," Dana murmured. "It's okay," Mrs. Ansell sighed weakly. "But if your daughter's been reacting to that room, it wouldn't be the first time. Even after Milo passed, that room never felt right, like sadness soaked into the walls." She hesitated. "Children notice things adults don't," she whispered. "And sometimes pets, they understand what children feel before we do." The call ended, leaving Dana shaken. She went to Ellie's nursery. Ellie slept curled around Waffle. Waffle's head rested on her chest. But his eyes were open, watching the crib corner. Always watching. The next night, everything changed. At 2:17 a.m., Dana woke to a frantic, high-pitched whimper she had never heard Waffle make before. Dana threw off the covers and bolted into the hall. She found Waffle planted squarely in Ellie's crib, trembling, his small body puffed up, not in aggression, but in desperate protection. Ellie was already out. She stood on wobbly legs, clutching her tiny hands over her mouth, shaking uncontrollably, her eyes wide and fixed on the darkness in the nursery behind her mother. Fear, not sadness this time. Pure, acute fear. "What happened?" Dana whispered, scooping Ellie into her arms. Ellie buried her face in Dana's chest, fists gripping her shirt, silently gasping. Waffle whined, circling their feet, looking back toward the crib. Dana, holding her daughter tight, slowly looked back. The crib corner appeared normal. But Waffle wasn't looking at the corner. He was looking at the floor, just inside the crib threshold. He slowly crept forward, nose down, and let out short, sharp whimpers. He began to paw lightly at the floor, then abruptly stopped and backed away, coming to hide his head between Dana's ankles. Dana knelt, setting Ellie down gently beside her. She shone her phone's flashlight directly onto the spot where Waffle had been pawing. Nothing but carpet. Then Waffle pushed past her, whimpering. He pressed his entire body into the corner of the crib, as close to the baseboard as he could get, and started frantically licking the wooden trim, making tiny, panicked noises. Ellie, watching the puppy, finally reacted. Slowly, hesitantly, she placed her tiny palm on the back of Waffle's head. And then she pointed, small, trembling finger, not at the crib corner, not at the floor, but directly at the baseboard where Waffle was frantically licking. Dana's breath hitched. She ran her hand along the baseboard, feeling for a scratch, a splinter, anything. Her fingers found it. A small, nearly invisible, smooth indentation. It wasn't a mark of wear. It was a scratch, barely deeper than the paint, made by something small and sharp. It was exactly at the height of a toddler's tiny fist. Dana realized it wasn't fear of a ghost. It was the absolute, raw, emotional memory of a moment of overwhelming grief. Waffle hadn't been afraid of a lingering spirit. He was sensing the final, acute moment of despair Milo felt. The silent, desperate scratch on the wall before he had to leave his safe place. And Ellie, with her heightened, silent sensitivity, had absorbed that exact moment of final fear. Waffle had been trying to lick the pain away. Understanding washed over Dana like a cleansing wave. Ellie wasn't afraid of the corner. She was feeling the acute, final moment of distress and panic that the former child, Milo, had left behind, the moment that was too much for even him to bear silently. And Waffle? He was afraid of that sheer, unadulterated pain. Dana pulled Ellie into a tight hug. "Sweetheart," she whispered, looking at the tiny scratch mark. "We are going to help Milo rest. We are going to let his pain go." That afternoon, Dana invited Mrs. Ansell to visit. The woman arrived with a small wooden box in trembling hands. Inside were Milo's crayons, a drawing he had made of a sunny day, and his favorite stuffed bear. Mrs. Ansell placed the bear in Ellie's hands. Tears filled her eyes as Ellie hugged it to her chest. Waffle sat between them both, tail wrapped around his paws, watching like he was witnessing something sacred. Then, softly, Mrs. Ansell whispered, "Thank you for giving this room love again." Over the next week, Dana repainted the nursery in bright yellow, Ellie's favorite color. They donated Milo's rocking chair to a children's museum, where it could be honored, not hidden. Dana meticulously sanded and repainted the baseboard, smoothing out the painful scratch mark, not erasing the memory, but healing the wound. She placed Milo's drawing in a small frame on the hallway wall, not as a haunting reminder, but as a tribute. And gradually Ellie's nights grew peaceful, much more peaceful. One morning as sunlight poured through the fresh curtains, Ellie sat quietly on the rug stacking soft blocks. Waffle napped beside her, chin on his paws. Dana walked in with a smile. "Breakfast is ready, sweetheart." Ellie turned. She opened her mouth, and for the first time in 4 months, a sound came out. A soft, small whisper. "Waffle." Dana broke. Tears streamed down her face as she dropped to her knees and pulled her daughter into her arms. Waffle barked. His very first bark, as if celebrating her voice. From that day onward, Ellie spoke again. Not perfectly at first, not constantly, but freely, willingly, joyfully. And her favorite word for many weeks was always Waffle, because it wasn't a therapist, or a doctor, or a specialist. It was a puppy. A tiny, loyal, intuitive puppy who stood between a child and her unseen sorrow, teaching her that she didn't have to carry sadness that didn't belong to her. He showed her how to feel safe again. And sometimes, that's all healing really needs. Waffle, the little puppy who saw what no one else could. Share in the comments the moment a pet or loved one changed your life. You never know who you might inspire. If this story touched your heart, hit like, subscribe, and turn on notifications for more real-life miracles.